Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's review, we are doing yet another solo brewer review of two different offerings from the same brewer. Today we are jumping back over to one of my favorite brewers, Unibroue. They are based in Chambly in Canada, which is in the province of Quebec. The first beer we're going to be reviewing is Lune de Miel, and this is a Belgian amber ale, 8% ABV on this one. If you're wondering, Lune de Miel means honeymoon in French. Second beer for today is Éphémère. This is a Belgian wheat ale that is brewed with apple. So apple Belgian wheat ale, 5.5% ABV on this one. And Éphémère is the French word for ephemeral, spelled extremely similarly, so that is not a false cognate. It actually is the base root from which English derived the word ephemeral. So nonetheless, two new Unibroue beers to me. I am really excited to jump in. I always love their beers. They're always good, and they're always unique, and they're always different. So we're going to jump right in, starting with Lune de Miel, the Belgian amber ale at 8% ABV. Okay, jumping right in with our first beer. This is Lune de Miel, means honeymoon again in French. This is the Belgian-style amber ale, 8% ABV on this one. I did say Belgian amber ale and called the other a Belgian wheat ale. It's not Belgian. It's not brewed in Belgium. It is brewed in Canada, in the French-speaking area, obviously Quebec, based out of the city of Chambly. But it is Belgian style, so it's brewed in the style of traditional brewing in Belgium. They also bottle condition or ferment their beers, which they do all of their beers that way. They're one of the few that do, and it's another distinction that kind of sets Unibroue apart from many, many other brewers out there. Additionally, you may have noticed, maybe you didn't, my bottle opener over here. At the suggestion of a subscriber, I'm going to open my bottles as I do my cans here. Don't know why, I never did it before, it just never occurred to me, so here we go. Hopefully you'll find this as satisfying as I do. Get right under there. That's just a foil, so it comes right off. All right, perfect. And nothing really so to speak in terms of label art. It's actually understated, but it's got this pretty cool little hexagon effect on the side, so it kind of looks like the grill and vents and interior decorating shape scheme of a modern Lamborghini. They love hexagons. But nonetheless, let's get this poured right in the glass. Oh, that's lovely. That's a lovely beer. Very, very effervescent, as is typical with Unibroue. I don't expect it to maintain that great of a head because it's so active. Yep, I didn't expect it to. They typically don't. Hold this up. Yeah, I would say overall this is more or less amber. It's maybe a little more yellow than amber than I would anticipate, but they pretty much got it. As with most Unibroue beers, because they are bottle fermented and conditioned, they do tend to have some natural cloudiness because there is active yeast sediment that settles at the bottom of the bottle and can indeed get poured into the glass, and that is not a bad thing. That is prototypical for bottle fermenting. But it's a lovely looking beer, very beautifully colored, very, very active carbonation here, very fine bubbles, as is typical. Let's give this a sniff. That's a very, very nice smelling beer. That smells very nice. It's got quite a pronounced aroma. On this one, I can tell you it smells quite fruity. I don't know what natural flavors they added, but it does state on the label brewed with spices and natural flavors. So maybe they added some fruit. It does smell kind of like apricot, maybe apricot mixed with peach. It smells very nice. It smells very bright and fruity. Doesn't smell overtly boozy at all. And as is common with Unibroue, you'll often get what smells like Hefeweizen yeast, kind of a hint of clove. I don't get any of that on the nose on this one. Not saying it won't come through in the flavor at all, but certainly on the aroma, I'm not detecting any of it. It just smells bright and fresh and rather fruity. So let's just jump right in and see what this one's about. I've never had this beer at all, so very excited. Mmm. 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 Oh, that's delicious. Oh yeah, that is absolutely delicious. Okay, so in terms of flavor, there's a big punch of brightness and kind of freshness and a slight malty sweetness up front. Just a slight hint of caramel, and then immediately behind that, you do get a big punch of a boozy quality. That does typically happen in Unibroue beers that are higher in ABV. This is 8%, so that's getting on up there. And the clove aroma and flavor that you get in many Unibrews, I'm not getting any of that in this beer at all. I don't smell any of it, and it doesn't come through in the flavor profile. So it's a little bit of an outlier in that respect, because the vast majority of the beers do have that characteristic. This one does not. I'm going to jump back in to explore the body and mouthfeel and how this finish fully develops. The body is medium heavy. Mouthfeel is ridiculously creamy. Very, very fine, active carbonation in there. That tends to happen. The finish, really exactly as I described, but it kind of peaks in intensity when kind of this fruit flavor opens up. It mixes with this malty sweetness. There is just the slightest hint of a caramel quality. This is an amber ale after all, and that's not uncommon. And it mixes with this booziness and fruit and just bright freshness. It's very bright. It's very crisp. Even though it's kind of a heavier beer, it's got these bright, fresh flavors, but it is a little bit of a heavier beer. Very nice body on the bigger end, certainly for the ABV, certainly for the style. Mouthfeel just ridiculously creamy and silky, but once those flavors kind of peak and apex in intensity, it becomes kind of an amalgam of everything that you could pick out individually up to that point. So you get the booze, you get the malty sweetness, and you get this bright, kind of fresh, ripe fruit flavor, and it's all mixing, and this slight caramel backbone of the malt, and then it starts its slow descent. It's not perfectly linear, but for the downward trend from the apex of flavor intensity, it starts roughly a straight line downward, and then when it gets near the bottom 20% of the finish, it starts to kind of taper out and plateau out to a more curve, normal on the bell curve. And it's very, very nice. And it's very even distribution of the flavors that come through. I'm going to jump back in one more time. I'm going to top this off, jump back in, and see if I can pinpoint exactly what fruit it tastes like to me. I know what it smells like, but I can't pinpoint what the actual flavor itself is. So I'm going to jump in one more time here. I think it kind of reminds me of a combination of grapes and apricots, which is kind of an interesting fruit flavor combination, but it works. It works in the beer. It's got that caramel richness and that slight booziness, and it's so bright and refreshing on the palate that honestly it just mixes very well. The kind of grape quality ends up pairing and mixing with that kind of boozy edge, so it almost takes on a wine-like quality or champagne-like quality where it just tastes right. And then the apricot kind of mixes with the caramelly malts, almost like you made a cobbler and there's caramelized sugar. It's very, very good. This is a very nice beer. Never had this one. As with most Unibroue beers, I am very excited to have gotten to try this. I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, count my scores. When we come back, we will get to Éphémère. That's the Belgian-style wheat ale that is brewed with apple. So it's apple Belgian-style wheat ale, 5.5% ABV. Okay, now moving on to our second beer of today's Unibroue review. It is Éphémère. This is the Belgian-style wheat ale that is brewed with apple. So an apple Belgian-style wheat ale. For bottle art on this one, it's got what looks like a fairy or god of lore or something on the label with some apples and baskets in front. It's actually a nice looking label. It's hard to tell from the camera, I'm sure, because it's quite small, but let's get this one cracked. Yet again, it's just foil, so it's easy to break through. All right. Oh, I can smell that from here. It smells very appley indeed. And as with the last, I expect it to be very effervescent and not really retain much of a head, so to speak, which is just fine. Holding it up, again, it is slightly cloudy, but it's a beautiful golden yellow color. The effervescence isn't quite as active on the last, and what I do see looks to be quite fine bubbles, and yeah, that head's pretty much already gone, but as I said, I could smell it. It's quite pungent. You can smell the apple quite strongly. I'm gonna get right in here. Smells appley, and it smells actually slightly boozy, which is interesting because it's only 5.5%. It kind of reminds me of the smell of hard cider. It's really kind of more or less what it smells like, but looks great, smells great, very strong aroma, beautiful color. Let's jump right in. That's very nice. That's very refreshing and very crisp. It tastes very apple forward. It is very, very apple forward, slightly sweet, very apple dominant. But layered with the apple, you do get the malt backbone. So it does have this slightly kind of bready, would be the best way to describe the way the malt comes through. And almost puts me in mind if you had a more doughy apple muffin, like an apple crumb muffin or something like that. That's very much what it tastes like. It's very, very good, and it's very bright, and it's very crisp. The mouthfeel is ridiculously creamy. It's just silky, creamy, smooth once you get it in your mouth and start rolling around the palate. And it ends up feeling quite thick. It's so creamy, it feels quite thick. The body, I'd say, is medium. For 5.5%, that's really about average, and really the sense of the wheat that comes through really is related to, I guess it's just the cloudiness really in the appearance. I'm not getting much else from the wheat really. It certainly probably imparted some of the creaminess to it. It certainly probably helped go along and create some of that kind of doughy grain bill that comes through, but other than that, nothing really else, so to speak. It's really nice. It's very refreshing. I would say this would be one of those beers that would go under my umbrella of great hot summer day beers. It's so light and bright and crisp and refreshing and so fruity. It just, oh, it's really, really good. This is a really good one. I'm going to top this off, take one more sip just to see precisely how and for what length this finish develops. So let's jump in one more sip here. Up front, when you first get it in your mouth, it's really kind of the malt. Then within that first second, the fruit comes in and it just jumps to the forefront. From there, the apple and the malt bill kind of commingle, and it's really about even parts apple and malt kind of to the end, and they're quite pronounced. Both of the flavors are quite dominant, and they play equal parts in this. It's a very, very well balanced beer. For a Belgian-style wheat ale, it's very nice. It's very light, and the apple really comes through. And it does have that slight sweetness, so it comes off even lighter still with just that slight sweetness. It really accentuates the apple flavor, which brightens it up. This is a very, very nice beer. I'm going to take my time and sip on this, come up with my scores, and when we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these beers, we're going to go through and getting them ranked, starting with the Lune de Miel. This is the Belgian-style amber ale, 8% ABV. Again, both beers are from Canada in Chambly, which is in the province of Quebec. Okay, so starting with the aroma. The aroma on this one was very nice. It was very pronounced. You could smell it from a good distance away and get a good idea of what the beer was going to taste like. It wasn't quite as pungent as some, but still well above average. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the taste, this was a really, really fantastic example of a Belgian-style amber ale. It was absolutely full of flavor, and it was really, really well balanced. So everything that they put in the beer really came through in the flavor. I gave that a 9 out of 10. The body on this, 8% ABV. You do expect a pretty big beer, and indeed it was. I did expect it to be a little bit more robust given the ABV. For the style, it was certainly huge, but given the ABV was that high, I thought it would be just a little bit bigger. It only missed the mark by 1 point for me. It gets a 9 out of 10. Mouthfeel on this was absolutely fantastic. It was lush and creamy. The effervescent nature of the beer really came through, and it just helped thicken up and silk out that mouthfeel. It was fantastic. I gave it a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish, quite a long finish on this beer. It certainly extended longer than your average amber ale, and really kind of the flavors that just kept extending. It was kind of that booze back quality that came through, and mixing with the malt and mixing with the flavors that they added in, and it just kept coming in and out and in and out, and it took it for a very long ride, certainly well above average. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Head and retention on this beer, not great. Very effervescent beer with very fine effervescence. I kind of expected it wouldn't, and really only just formed during the pour and immediately just disappeared. So it only gets a 2 out of 10. Appearance-wise, this was a very lovely beer. For an amber ale, I thought that it was pretty close. Typically, they're a little darker than this, but it wasn't that far off and certainly within range. I gave the appearance a 9 out of 10. For the balance was very nice on this beer. Honestly, since they added some flavors, I would have liked for them to come through a little more strongly, and also for the malts to come through a little more strongly. I think that kind of the boozy back kind of overrided both aspects of it just a little bit and muted them, but it was still an excellent balanced beer. I gave it a 9 out of 10. Feeling intangible, I really enjoyed this one. I don't often go for amber ales, and in particular Belgian-style amber ales, but this is a really well-done version, and it has a lot going for it. Just a couple little minor nitpicks, but I gave it a 9 out of 10. Finally, is an example of the style. This is where the nitpicks I did have really kind of come in and bring the score down a bit. Really, it comes down to, I don't want to say head and retention because I knew what to expect. And really, it should have 1, and a 2 is not that great of a score. But kind of the little nitpicks I had on the balance, the nitpicks I had on the taste, and the nitpicks I had on the finish, I took all of those into consideration. I teeter-tottered on going a little higher, but I did give it a 7 out of 10. That brings the total score on this one to an 81 out of 100. Very, very good beer. Certainly well above average. And if you enjoy the style or Unibroue beers in particular, I think you're really going to enjoy this one. Moving on to beer number 2, Éphémère. This is the Belgian-style wheat apple ale. 5.5% ABV on this one, so quite a bit lower. The aroma on this is one of those super pungent beers. You could smell it from a great distance away. Don't even have to get near the glass. Gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Taste on this. This was fantastic. That they made it an apple version of a wheat Belgian-style ale, and it really came through like dominantly. I was very surprised. I didn't expect it, and it was quite a treat. I give it a 10 out of 10. Body-wise on this. Body was okay. 5.5%, on a wheat ale. Typically, they're not going to be super heavy, but this was a little lower than I anticipated for the ABV. I still gave it above average. I gave it a 7 out of 10. For the mouthfeel, just as with the Lune de Miel, it was fantastic. Super silky, super creamy. You couldn't ask for better. It could have been poured off of a tap. It gets a 10 out of 10. Finish on this one. The finish was nice, and you got a really nice interplay of the malt backbone and the apple, but it wasn't ridiculously long. It was longer than average, but not top tier. It gets a 7 out of 10. Head and retention, same as with the Lune de Miel. It gets a 2. It was just there and gone, never to be seen again. Just too effervescent to maintain. Appearance-wise, this was an absolutely lovely beer. It might have been a slight shade darker than your average wheat ale, but it did have apple in it, and I took that into consideration, and it wasn't that much darker than standard. I went with my gut, and I gave it the full 10 out of 10 for the appearance. Balance on this. This was an absolutely perfect balance of malt and apple. Couldn't have done it better. Honestly, I think they nailed it with this beer. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible, I really enjoyed this one. I didn't really know what to expect and certainly didn't anticipate a little sweetness and the apple to come through as strongly as it did, but it absolutely did. And it made for a very crisp, clean, bright, fresh, enjoyable beer. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, I teeter-tottered on this one as well, especially considering the realms that made me rate the prior beer a 7. This one had a little lower body than I anticipated. The finish wasn't quite as long as I anticipated, and the head and retention really wasn't great. But when I really sat down and thought about it, I only docked 1 point because everything else, it did so well in the beer. Just as an example of what a fruited Belgian-style wheat ale could be, I thought they really came close to perfection with this one. I gave it a 9 out of 10. That brings the total score on Éphémère to an 85 out of 100. So all totaled, only a 4-point spread between these two beers. Both excellent beers. I highly recommend both of them. Completely different, but if you've had Unibroue beers, you kind of have an idea of what to expect. They really do a great job with their beers up there, and absolutely fantastic. I love anytime I can review some new Unibroues. I'm always on the lookout, and these were no exception. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much as always for tuning in. Please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. All of them really help the channel. Subscribe will help you because it'll keep our videos in your feed. And if it ever drops out, you can just click your subscriptions button to go straight to our channel and catch up on any content you missed. Please don't forget, if you want to keep in the loop, just click the notification bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button, and you'll know right when our videos go live to YouTube. Till next time, folks, keep it beer. Keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.